oftentimes in conflict. And my PhD 10 years ago or 15 years ago was about illegal file sharing, peer-to-peer copyright piracy. I got fascinated by library Genesis and all these pirate libraries, Sci-Hub, because what I saw that there is a very strict copyright regime which limits access to books, limits access to culture, and once people get access to a good technology with which they can build alternative realities and alternative worlds, they are able to create wonderful things. And the key there is open source, the key there is the distributed technological infrastructure. So when blockchains came, I thought, hey, maybe there is something again happening here, that people have a tool in their hands with which they can build a completely new world, which will be in conflict with law. So I was curious, what is this new world being built, and who will win this fight, this celebrity death match between lawyers and technologists?
Right. Thank you very much for this introduction, Dr. Bodó. Then we would like to invite Dr. Tuler Oliveira to introduce who she is and what she does.
Yeah, so pleased to be here. My name is Marcela Tuler, and I'm assistant professor at TU Delft and Trustworthy Data Systems. I get to blockchain since my master's degrees, actually, and in a similar path of trying to find a way of establishing consensus about data sharing and how can we establish a distributed data management and have persistence on data versioning. And then it opened up, actually, a lot of other possibilities of usage since in 2017, when smart contracts was actually blooming in Ethereum, and the research was going on, a lot of research started going on in smart contract. That's what got my attention, and during my PhD, I was researching on healthcare data sharing systems, and it was a perfect matching since healthcare institutions don't have a governance on top of them. They are their own entities, and they are only under law, under regulations, but governments usually don't settle rules for them. They actually are the responsible entities. And when they're talking about sharing data between their hospitals, it becomes a mess. It becomes a long list of ethical meetings and agreements for data processing agreements, which becomes very difficult to actually enforce. So that's what has been my focus lately, and using smart contracts to enforce access control policies and bridge this gap between institutions and also make a transparent way of data sharing. Yeah.
Right. Thank you for this introduction. So, Dr. Tuler, you're specialized in the application of DLTs, distributed ledger technologies, in the form of smart contracts, which are self-executing agreements to ensure transparency and security. Would you talk us through some applications of these contracts in the way that you see them being used these days?
Yeah. So since the beginning of smart contracts, we know that there has been a lot of application in cryptocurrency. You all probably more familiar with it, but there is so many potentials on actually having transparent agreements. For example, reducing the burn on notary, for example, and also on, especially in my case, for data sharing agreements itself. So believe that instead of assets being just money, think an asset's actually something that you want to trade. And from my perspective in my research, what you want to trade is actually information. And this is actually gold, right? You all know nowadays how important it is. And at the same way, we have to be transparent for other reasons, for auditability, for law, regulations and compliance. So it becomes like urgent to have a persistent way of evaluating the rules, having clear statements of what is possible to do and what is not, and how this data should be processed. So in my research lately, I've been using attribute-based access control. I don't know, from the computer scientist here, maybe you are familiar with it. And we're trying to design rules in the contracts, and then being able to enforce these rules in a distributed manner. And everybody that's in this network can see what is the requested rules, what are the requirements, and then actually provide the right attributes to do so. And if you have the rights to process the data, then this contract will result in permit. And if not, it's a denial. So it's a clear access control protocol, but instead of having a cloud telling you if you have a right the permission, we are delegating this to the network. Yeah?
Just to clarify a bit for those who are not maybe experts, I know I'm not. So what you just described is how distributed ledger technologies can be used to share information. And blockchain is an application that uses DLTs. No? Oh. Up? Can you guys hear me? Yes, sorry. So what you just described is distributed ledger technologies and how it's used to share information, especially in terms of blockchain. Could you explain blockchain to us a bit more and just like the basic introduction to
Definitely,
what it is?
yes. So blockchain is a combination of two main parts. One is the network, which is having the same point of view of this data. And the other part is the persistence of the data itself. And we depend on both to blockchain technology to actually work. So you need to have a network that actually agree on the versioning and how the process of data sharing is done and the state is done. So it has a possible combinations of consensus mechanisms existing nowadays. The most known is proof of work, which maybe you know, but I can talk about this too. And the other part is the blockchaining, so how the data is persistent. And imagine that every exchange of data is a transaction. And then a transaction, once it's valid, once it's correct according to the rules of the network, it can be added to a block. And that's how we indexate data in the blockchain. And then every time we close a block, it's called block mining, we have a new data persistent, new information persistent in this blockchain. And everybody should update their version to the last version of the block. So it's a way that everybody has the same point of view, a global version of the data, which brings the beauty of the blockchain that we don't need to have a central power to say which is the last version. Who says the last version is the majority. So if the majority says block N is the last version, and somebody changed their point of view, it doesn't affect the rest of the network. So it's kind of, I don't know if I can say democracy somehow, that the majority tells the truth or decide the rules. In that sense, I'm sorry if too much, but that's how it is. So we don't need a bank in that sense, or we don't need a notary to tell you how much you have in your wallet, basically. Everybody knows how much everybody has in their wallet. So that's how you know if you have enough to send the transaction or not. And then since the code is persistent, then there is no way.
Very much he focuses as well on decentralization and trust within governance. So how do you believe like smart contracts, applications that aim to provide more transparency, how do they contribute towards trust in society?
As I was listening to you, Marcela, one thing hit my ear, and that was like, you don't need a bank, you don't need a notary to tell you how much money you have in your bank account, which is certainly one function of these institutions to actually keep a ledger, but certainly not the only one. And this is what I noticed in my research in the discussions around this technology. Not just blockchain, but you can use it to platforms, to AI, to social media, to the internet in general, that there is a technological infrastructure, there is a technological innovation, in this case, a way to keep trace of transactions in a persistent manner, in another way to predict information based on training data, or connect people to each other through electronic means. And using that technological set of capabilities, we start to imagine alternative realities of how society, how politics, how the economy, how different institutions can be built. And we also connected these with positive expectations. These are all utopias that we are thinking in. AI will bring in a new era of knowledge and peace, and it will end world hunger. Blockchain was said to end world hunger. The internet was also said to end world hunger. So we very quickly jumped from a set of technologies to a way of organizing the world around us. Now, this is what I've noticed, that many, especially from people coming with an engineering background, and I mean this as no offense, because every discipline has this myopia. Lawyers have this myopia, social scientists have this myopia, are somehow focus on one aspect of a complex problem and extrapolate from that. So the question of like, what is the role of the bank, to get back to where I started, the bank's role, the role of the bank as a ledger keeper is like 1% of what a bank does, or like 0.5% or a fraction of a percent. For me, what's very important is like it produces trust in all our financial transactions. That I can trust that if I send you a ticky and then you respond to that ticky, I will get the money. I can trust that if the bank goes bankrupt, I will still get my money back. I can trust that if I pay with my credit card and the seller doesn't deliver, I can get my money back. Right? I can trust that I can put a deposit and then something, if something is not happening, then I get my deposit back. So I can trust that there is a financial system always available. I can use my bank card, I can use my banknotes to buy bread, I can use it to buy a house, I can use it to exchange to a foreign currency. This is what the banking system does. Focusing on the ledger keeping, and say, hey, we don't need the banks. Maybe we don't need the banks for the ledger keeping, but what is all the other things that we get rid of when we get rid of the banks is a completely different set of questions, and these are not engineering questions in the first place.
Right. Thank you for your explanation on how you view this system, and thank you, Dr. Tuler, for the explanation of blockchain as a whole. As we've as was touched on a bit, the blockchain is public, so every transaction that happens from wallet to wallet can be seen. This creates a kind of openness and transparency, and I think Dr. Bodó touched on it very nicely. It creates trust, because you can kind of see what happens, and you understand that when money moves from one place to the other, you can be expected to receive that money. On this, we would like to pose another question to Dr. Bodó. If at some point this wallet, this transparency, kind of creates a society in which trust is no longer needed because it's guaranteed, we might call that a trustless system. Would you say that the move towards a trustless system is a positive one, or would it undermine what we've built so far?
So I started out as a blockchain, to research blockchains, and I ended up with a university-wide research priority area, trust in the digital society. You can Google that. It's an UvA-wide collaboration. We have people from the computer science department, humanities, social sciences, law, and economics. And what we are trying to understand is, how do we trust each other when there are so many digital technologies in between us in all these relations where we need trust. And most of these technologies are fundamentally untrustworthy. We do not know whether we can trust them. We do not know whether we can trust the platforms. We do not know whether we can trust the smart contract, or it has a bug, or it's being exploited. We do not really know whether we can trust AI responses. So what happens when we start to build trust between each other using technologies which we do not know if we can trust? the answer to your question struck me when I saw the city of Amsterdam, the municipality of Amsterdam, experimenting with blockchain-based technologies, digital identity wallets, smart contracts in the public administrations. And I was wondering, it's like, I come from Hungary. Hungary is a very low-trust country. Nobody trusts anyone. No, people don't trust the government, people don't trust each other, the government doesn't trust the citizens, businesses don't trust each other, and this makes Hungary a very bad place to live. It also makes Hungary a very bad place to do business. And coming here, what I've learned in practice is, what does it mean to live in a high-trust society? What does it mean where people trust each other? I can leave my bag around and I can trust that it won't be stolen. I can trust that the government trusts me and treats me as an adult, and I can trust my government, right? And so I was, when I saw City of Amsterdam experimenting with these trustless technologies, I was wondering why on earth in a high trust society, a trusted public institution wants to get rid of the most valuable social resource it has, the trust in the citizens. And why does it stake its future on a technology which doesn't need trust, doesn't allow trust to be built, and doesn't require trust to operate? It's like, what's the logic behind that? So for me, trust is one of the most important things we have in interpersonal relations and also societal relations, and any technological innovation which tries to get rid of that or replace it with something mechanical, I treat it with the utmost suspicion.
Right, thank you.
I'd be very interested in your take as well, because in your research you aim to kind of combine scalability with security and trust issues, and you see that as a positive thing, correct?
Yeah. So I totally agree with you about the value of trust. And I also believe that technology cannot build trust by itself. It's required that actually they require trust in the end in the technology because you need to understand if the technology is actually delivering what they promised you. And that's the first premise of trust. You only trust in anything or in any person that actually keep their promise. That they're supposed to do, they have the ability to do, and they do it for their benevolence. So not trying to do harm. And that's kind of the pillar of trust. For, I think, I would say 99% of the things, the interrelationships between people and maybe services and systems. I think the blockchain technology, called distributed ledger technology, so to remove a little bit the stigma of crypto and think about only the technology itself and consortium applications, for example, which is the focus of my research, and using the distributed ledger technology as a tool. It's actually something that can bring transparency, which in the end shows and creates the reputation that builds the trust. But it's not trust by itself. You still need to observe. You still need to be able to track and audit if things were actually compliant to what you agreed in the beginning, which is what the person promised. And then you can actually see if the person is complying, is fulfilling their promise, and then they are trustworthy. So nowadays we live in a little shady moment on data because first, we don't understand how the AI is being developed. So the AI that we are using daily, it's still a black box, not explainable, not so transparent. Data sharing agreements, once you actually share the data, you lost control of it. So you believe, you trust that they are going to be compliant with what they promised they will, but you don't have clear auditing. And we depend on all these cloud solutions that are not transparent at all. So we don't know what they are actually doing. They say that we delegate our security protocols to the cloud solutions. We put our photos, our data, our everything digitally in the cloud solutions that are not showing to us how they are actually processing our data and who can have access to it. So in that sense, we need a transparent mechanism, let's say, that can help us to build trust in the systems that we are daily using. That's, I think, the add value of distributed ledger technologies. We should not be obliviated and say that, oh, can solve everything. No, no, no. This is just a plug-in tool that you should add to existing technologies, existing systems that are in place, and see how can we create like a transparency layer or like a portal of transparency, that you can see how data should be processed or how it has been processed, and have consistent logs of what happened in our society. So you can bring to every other thing. Yeah.
Right, thank you. On that point, you make a very good statement at the end where you think it should be implemented rather than replace for existing technologies. On that point, we would like to pose the question, do you think there will ever be a point where smart, so decentralized contracts would ever replace traditional legal contracts? Or do you reckon there will always be a need for human interpretation or intervention? And I'll pose the same question to Dr. Bodó after this.
I hope it's come to play soon in real applications, to be honest. There is so many initiatives in data spaces lately, and also so many regulations now that oblige us to be transparent. There is a new Transparency EU regulation in the oven. Yeah, it's coming out soon. And companies need to be more transparent about how they're processing our data, how platforms like social media is actually using our data. Marketing companies, how they are processing our information. So there is, at least, there is a common sense of need for transparency, and I believe that that will be one of the ways of bringing the transparency aspect and traceability of data, how data provenance, or where this came from, where this going to, and showing why we are doing this. And yeah, I think that in healthcare, since healthcare is one of the most healthcare applications, that's still behind, comparing to industrial applications, because, well, their focus is not data. Their focus is caring of patients. So it's usually kind of overlooked, and I actually ended up doing my PhD in a healthcare institution here at the UvA, at the AMC. And we know how it was so difficult to have agreements between the hospitals for data sharing for research purpose and for clinical purpose. You all probably here as citizens have been in a GP, and then your GP knows everything about you. But when you go to a hospital for an emergency situations, they have no idea about your medical history. And it's 2025. Why? Probably the social media companies know much more about your health status than your hospital. And this is a clear need, we need to bridge between these institutions and have a way of data sharing. And I believe the transparency of smart contracts can help them to establish the trust between them and complying to the new regulations.
Right, yeah. Thank you. And then I would like to pass the same question on to Dr. Bodó, if he has any comments about this.
I would like to answer your question and maybe get back to Marcela's points on healthcare data sharing, because that's a very fascinating domain to look at. So will smart contracts replace contracts? So the smart contract idea comes from this metaphor of the vending machine somewhere where you put in your money and the chocolate comes out. And that was the smart contract idea, that you can automatize input and delivery kind of exchanges. And what we've learned since, that it doesn't go any further than that. So it's maybe a great tool for all those transactions where you don't expect anything to go wrong. And that doesn't even apply for a vending machine, because if the vending machine, the chocolate just gets stuck in the delivery, you start to have problems. And then you try to tilt the machine and try to kick the machine or scream, or maybe if you're super stingy, you will call the number and try to get your €2 back, right? So these are the problems which go wrong in even the most mechanical interpretation of the smart contract. And if you ask lawyers what a contract is, they will tell you that the contract is actually a way to negotiate conflict. You try to write up all the possible points of contentious differences in a contract, but you know very well that the contract will never be complete. You will never be able to account for all the possible ways to go that could go wrong. So the contract is never alone. There is the judicial system around that. So if you cannot sit down based on the contract that you've written, trying to negotiate the points that you disagree on, which are not covered by the contract, then you can still go to the court and ask the judge to do something. So it's a language, it's a mechanism, it's a process, it's an institution to handle exceptions, deal with conflicts, differences. And it's not the written signed paper what's important, not even the points in there that's important, but the whole framework which allows the contract to exist in the first place. So I hope that there will be never a place on earth where there will be no contracts, only smart contracts, because it would mean that we are living in a world which operates like a vending machine, giving us as much agency vis-a-vis the world as we have vis-a-vis a vending machine if it doesn't spit out the chocolate.
Oh, definitely. And that's the thing I probably forgot to mention. I think the creator of smart contracts, the guy that developed Ethereum, in one of his tweeters, he actually regrets saying, I regret call a smart contract. Because it's too, I know it's too hype, it's too exciting name. It's supposed to be persistent script. That's it. That's the name of smart contract, and that's what it is. It's not a contract. It's just an persistent script that has received an input and will always deliver the same expected output because of persistence. So, yeah, it's not a contract.
It's not smart.
No. It's a smart in execution, but not in application in real society. Definitely not. Yeah. So it requires much more than that. It's a little piece of the execution part, probably.
All right, thank you guys so much. We'll head into 10 minutes of audience questioning now, and I hope you guys have some questions for our speakers today. So, yeah, if Ilona can take a mic, or Melis, yeah. If you have questions, just ask Melis to hand you the mic.
Raise your hand.
There. We have a question there.
Maybe not necessarily fully a question, but an open-ended question. When you were talking about how ERs and a lot of medical centers don't necessarily have quite a lot of our private information, I was more wondering if that necessarily isn't hinting towards also an issue of oversharing data with a lot of social media entities and not actually having it with entities that are related to the government or a lot of like other companies that we don't trust as much in a sense. And I don't necessarily see how also providing more information, private information of our, health care data is also necessarily such a beneficial thing. But yeah, maybe you could expand upon this a bit.
You mean for between clinicians, between doctors?
Yeah, maybe were you only suggesting that it would be shared in between healthcare institutions?
Yeah.
Okay. And private entities would not be involved?
No.
Yeah, okay.
No. So I can tell a little bit of where this came from. So healthcare systems usually has a very, let's say, basic access control protocol, which is role-based, and actually very patient-clinician relationship. So if you have once been treated by this doctor has access to your data. If you've never been treated by this doctor and you come to a hospital in an emergency situation, this doctor that will treat you will never get access by default. they need to break the glass. That's like a procedure in Epic, which is the most common healthcare system use it, which is a bridge. Everybody can break the glass. I mean, it is a public space, I cannot say that, but I could break the glass as a PhD student. So this is critical, yeah. So these systems are so vulnerable, and there has this fake impression that is somebody that will look to this break the glass procedure, because basically it's a pop-up. It come a pop-up for you, say you don't have access to this data. Are you sure you want to break the glass? And then you click yes. And then it happens again. Are you sure you want to break the glass? And yes. Give a purpose, which is a free text. Then nobody put anything. And in the end, you have access to the data. It could be an emergency, and actually they need it, right? But how many other times there was no emergency and this data was leaked? And that is a full list of break the glass that happens per day, and that is a person that is responsible to read and investigate if that was a legitimate request or not. Can you imagine this? I put one of my master students that was from here, by the way, from AV, to do a clustering, try to understand the behavior on these logs, which was very difficult because there were so many types of requests, and just classifying them was already challenging. And imagine judging if it was legitimate or not. So the systems need a more granular, a more dynamic access control that actually represents the complexity of a hospital, a complexity of what is legitimate request and what is not. And that's why I like attribute-based access control, because we can combine contextual information to validate and justify the request that you're doing, you know?
And maybe could you expand a bit more how that relates to the EU cloud services that they're hoping to create in the future to also have these, institutions have access more to people's data in general, and not only for private use, but also for research. Mm-hmm. It's like this new initiative from the EU that they want to create the unified cloud service.
Yeah. Well, I saw this, but that's actually a kind of a call for help, because we are depending on all the American cloud providers now. So there is this urgency that we actually depend on them in so many basic crucial services like healthcare. And what happened now, at least at the IMC, is that we have our own in-premises servers. So we have our own cloud, private cloud, just for the hospital. And they have the impression of boundaries, but in the end, there is this protocol that actually, it's a backdoor that everybody can exploit. So this is the reality for probably all the hospitals in the Netherlands, I would say. And the initiative of European Union is to try to have one EU provider that could compete, right, with Google and Amazon and Azure. I hope we can get a cloud provider from you, but still, they're still struggling on this access control and usage control layer, which we need to establish once we go to a cloud that can be accessible and shared among all the hospitals. That would be ideal. That's actually the grant that paid my PhD, was to develop this cloud, this healthcare cloud for Europe. It's still not there, right? So I hope it comes to reality, and that is a real need for that.
Right. I would like to kind of move this question also to Dr. Bodó. How do you believe a unified cloud such as this one for all of the EU would create or undermine trust in society?
I don't know if the question is like when different people talk about cloud, what do they mean? Is it just the shared computing and storage infrastructure? Is it something industry or domain specific? Because data sharing is very different in the healthcare sector, as in the automotive sector, as in the public sector, as in the... so it's like when people talk about cloud, it's very cloudy for me. I don't know what people are... yeah. But when it comes to the, going back to the healthcare data, it's super interesting. And you say, yeah, breaking the glass is problematic. And I also see that in many instances, the answer to that kind of, can we trust the healthcare provider, can we trust the bank, can we trust the government? No, is that, okay, so we have to give control over data sharing and data management and data control back to the individual. So it's your wallet, it's your identity, it's in your pocket. Every time you go to a platform, every time you go to a healthcare provider, every time you go to a bank, every relevant data is in your pocket, and every time you make sure that you give access to someone who requests information from you on a case-by-case basis on a super granular level, right? This is, but that's, like, this is not how we organize trust in society, right? Because if each and every individual is made responsible for every decision where they are relying on someone else, so they should be carry the burden of verifying whether the counterparty is trustworthy, then we wouldn't be able to get out of the bed, because we would need to check whether the building in the first place is trustworthy by our own eyes, and then go out and check by our own eyes if the tram is trustworthy to step on, and so on, and so on, and so on. So in modern societies, what we do is institutionalize distrust. So we trust institutions to distrust in our name, right? So we trust someone to actually check all those breaking the glass justifications, and we trust them that they will be distrustful, because this is why we pay them, to be suspicious and distrustful and read every sentence written in that thing, and their job is to raise the red flag, because so we don't have to, right? So we can trust going into the hospital, and we don't face that problem. It's like, ooh, we have an unconscious patient. I would really need to know her or his or her pre-existing conditions, but I cannot ask them because they are unconscious. So this is the alternative that I see, is that we either deputize everyone, which would drive all of us crazy and break society, or we try to, like, improve this institutionalization of distrust to make sure that there is always someone watching the watcher. And there is always a watcher, and there is always someone watching the watcher, and there is always someone watching the watcher, watching the watcher.
I like that, watching the watcher.
Before I follow up on that, are there any more questions that the audience would like to ask? We'll also have a final round at the very end, so you could also ask there. Yeah?
Hi. I was wondering about the blockchain itself. You said it's transparent, and I was wondering about the blockchain itself. You said it's transparent, and I was just wondering, is it transparent by nature, or is it one of the rules that could be stuck to a blockchain?
Yeah, well, it needs to be by nature, because it's what keeps the consistency and the common view. There are initiatives lately with Hyperledger to have private transactions inside the blockchain. And the private transactions, in the sense, has certain verification to be valid. And then there is an exchange of keys, so though this transaction could be available. But these are initial initiatives very recently of applications with private transactions. But by default, the security of the protocol relies on the transparency. So you cannot have consensus about what is the line of transactions if you cannot read it, if you cannot execute the contract. So if somebody tells you that is a private application that the people confidentiality is kept, something is wrong. There is probably a gap on the tech part on that the consensus might be compromised, unless they are developing something new that I'm not aware of. That's possible too. Yeah.
If I may add on the transparency question, many of the discussions around transparency revolve as if it was a binary concept. It's something is either transparent or not. And second, that transparency is good. We want more transparency rather than less transparency. I don't think any of these premises are actually accurate. Transparency is a scale. And also there are places and quite many situations when you don't want to be transparent. You wouldn't show me your photo collection on your mobile phone for very good reasons. You don't want to show me your healthcare file. You don't want to show me your bank account transactions. There are many things where we don't want transparency or want very limited transparency, right? We show our bank account transactions to our accountant, but not to our mother or not to our partner. And this is what I see also in how the distributed ledger technologies evolved. It evolved through, okay, total transparency on the transaction history, zero transparency on the link between the account holder and the account, and the content of the transactions, as you say. And that is like, people were very enthusiastic about this concept of transparency, and then they realized, oh, fuck, this is not what we want. We don't want transparency in the transaction history, because it makes it very difficult to cheat. It makes it also very difficult to donate to Wikipedia or WikiLeaks. So they started to invent new technologies to obfuscate transactions through tumblers and whatnot. And then they realized, ooh, the total intransparency of who the account holder is also not good, because we cannot build reputation. So they started to engineer around engineered forms of transparency and intransparency, because it realized that the default, as it was originally envisaged, it's just not applicable to some use cases. So they started to recreate all this complexity around transparency that we see in the real life. It's sometimes you want to be transparent, sometimes you want to be half transparent to certain parties. You want to share data, you don't want to share data, and this transparency machine just turned into this something which is not according to the original IDs and specifications.
I think a question I would like to ask then to wrap up this train of thought for you right now would be, how do you then suggest we would resolve the kind of opposition between the need for privacy and the need for transparency? How would you find a middle ground with that?
I think transparency is purpose specific, right? And there are forms of transparency which you want to show everything to everyone, because you believe that with enough eyes, all bugs are shallow, right? You want to make the legislative process as transparent as possible. You want to make the university as a knowledge institution as transparent as possible. You want to do your research methods as transparent as possible, so it's replicable, la-di-da-di-da. In other cases, you have designated institutions who possess the required expertise to actually make sense of a particular form of visibility on certain parts of processes, right? So it makes no sense to make a drug approval process fully transparent, because even if you do, only those people will be able to make sense of the information contained within who have the specific expertise. The same with smart contracts. You can make the smart contract code transparent as hell, can you read it? Can I read it? Can you read it? I cannot do anything with that kind of transparency. And those who can needs to be empowered to actually use that kind of visibility on certain processes and make a difference if they see something. So transparency doesn't come, the problem doesn't end with transparency. The problem begins with transparency, and then the question is like, okay, so there are people who have the expertise to make sense out of the visibility on information. How do we empower them to actually raise a red flag, block something, request changes, recommend against usage when they see something amiss? So I think transparency, talking about transparency alone, it makes only sense in specific circumstances.
Thank you so much for that extensive answer. Also following up on that a bit, but also for Dr. Tuler de Oliveira. So how have you seen blockchain grown in the past, let's say, 10 years? And this closely links to the topic of institutions taking in this rise of blockchain and going from kind of an anti-state one, if we focus on the United States and Trump, to a state-sponsored one. So let's first start off by defining how it's changed, and then let's go into the socio-political aspect.
Yeah, you probably are familiar with the crypto coins and see how crazy valuable this became, which we nowadays know that creates a lot of impact in our environment, since it's based on proof of work. And I didn't have the time to explain the proof of work, but it requires a lot of calculation, and which made a real competition among people with money. So they start to invest in servers to process these numbers and block as much blocks they could. So which means they receive a compensation for every block they mine. And this now is millions of dollars invested, and also farms of processors around the world, consuming energy for the only sake of getting the first position and closing this block. So, which in the beginning probably came up with a brilliant idea of establishing consensus among untrust parties, creates actually a gigantic monster for our environment, and people sees that. So it's part of the big stigma on the blockchain technology is the impact of proof of work. But the majority of people don't know that there is other type of consensus mechanisms, much older than blockchain, in distributed file systems, based on Byzantine proof tolerance, for example, and other voting mechanisms that could guarantee the consensus among the versioning of the data, which is what proof of work actually sets. The first to close sets the new block, and that's the truth, and everybody accepts it. And the other way around is that the majority needs to agree, which is the last version of the blockchain, of the block, and which means there is newer applications seeing the benefits, seeing the value of the technology, and instead of going the direction of Bitcoin and Ethereum, which limited their applications only for cryptocurrencies nowadays, to go to a more let's say, greener consensus mechanisms, which are depending on actually you knowing who are in the blockchain. So it requires that you actually know the network you're building, and therefore limit a little bit, or create new applications, actually, not limit, but create new applications that actually are based on networks that you know, but you still don't trust fully on them, because maybe they are not responsive to you. Not that they are malicious, but they're not always responsive to you. So that's also a thing. And these applications nowadays have been used for enterprise applications, so between companies, or for supply chain. That is a real new applications in supply chain, and for example for food safety transparency, which all the stakeholders could report to the same blockchain and show their, for that cases, or I'm pretty sure everybody want to know if your food is being processed correctly, and you know, and if the validated and it's the expiration date is correct and all these things that we can log, and still need the trust because the data inputted in the systems need to be trustworthy, right? But even though this is our way of bridging this new technologies, and that's, I think, how the blockchain has been evolving in terms of add value to our society. Migrating from the crypto coin stigma to a more business-oriented and enterprise-oriented solutions to increase transparency and reputation among parties.
Yep. And then on the note of how it's become sort of an anti-state to state-sponsored mechanism, Dr. Bodó, you have anything to add on that?
I find it absurd. Like the whole Bitcoin thing came out of this. This is the anti-state. This is the libertarian utopia that there is fiat money, and all this fiat money is evil because central banks and states inflate, and then they can take away your money, and you rely on banks, and no one is trustworthy. And the first block in blockchain was mined at the middle of the 2008 financial crisis. So it was a response to the collapse of the global financial system, and was meant to set up as an alternative to this institutional order. And now what you hear is that the blockchain community is going head over heels with Trump establishing the strategic Bitcoin reserve. It's like, what the actual fuck is there? And how do we turn from the anti-state libertarian utopia into the celebration of authoritarian policy? And there is no technology without politics. Every technological system is inherently political, and this is what you see here, is that, if the naked financial interest dictates so you turn from a libertarian to an authoritarian corner of the politics, then you will do so. The community will do so because this is what makes money. I don't see anything else in that. That's just pure naked financial self-interest, which is a very shitty way to organize anything.
Thank you for these very clear statements on this. I think on this note, we are coming to the end of our talk. We would like to sincerely thank both of you guys for coming today and talking about this very interesting, very actual topic with us from both of your different perspectives. So the more like societal aspect and the more actual technological aspect of both of them. And for that we have some gift bags for you that they're going to grab right now. And furthermore, we would like to just thank you in general for coming today, as well as the audience.
Well, thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you very much. And thank you for organizing this.
Yeah. On that note, BètaBreak's next event will be on March 12th on the epistemological divide between the sciences and the humanities. It will take place here, and we will have 3 speakers showing us. So block your agendas and please show up. Thank you guys so much for coming today.